Most people think toxic people ruin their peace because they're cruel, manipulative, or just too loud for their own good. But Machiavelli would tell you that the real reason they have power over you is much simpler. You allow them access to your reactions. They survive by feeding on the emotional chaos of others. The moment you remove that fuel, they vanish, like fire with no oxygen. And that's exactly what these 7 habits do. They starve toxic people of the very energy they need to keep existing in your world. The first habit is emotional neutrality. Most people mistake calmness for weakness, but in the Machiavellian sense, it's one of the purest forms of control. When a toxic person insults you, they don't actually care about the insult itself. What they're doing is setting emotional traps. They're observing how quickly you lose composure, how defensive you get, how desperate you are to prove yourself. That's their power test. The stronger your reaction, the more control they gain. So Machiavelli would say, never grant them the luxury of your outrage. Respond like a mirror, still, expressionless, unreadable. Not fake positivity, not passive aggression, true neutrality. Because the moment they can't read you, they can't use you, it makes them deeply uncomfortable. They either escalate and reveal their instability, or they withdraw entirely. Either way, you win. The second habit is what Machiavelli called selective exposure. Toxic people can't harm what they can't reach, and most people make the mistake of believing that setting boundaries means confrontation. But a Machiavellian doesn't fight for boundaries, they design them. He'd say, control access, not emotions. If someone drains you, you don't announce your withdrawal, you simply vanish into controlled distance. Limit your presence. Don't give explanations, because explanations invite negotiation. You owe no one a justification for protecting your energy. A ruler doesn't tell his enemies where his gates are locked. He simply ensures they stay locked. The less access people have to you, the more respect they're forced to show when they finally do. The third habit is strategic silence. Silence isn't the absence of speech, it's a form of psychological dominance. Machiavelli knew that when 2 people argue, the quieter one often wins, because words reveal need, and need is weakness. Toxic people thrive in verbal chaos, debates, confrontations, gossip. They need noise to twist narratives. But when you stop giving them that sound, they begin arguing with themselves. They overthink, overanalyze, and self-destruct, trying to interpret your calm. Every silence from you becomes a reflection of them. They project their own insecurities into the void you leave. That's the genius of silence. It turns their manipulations into mirrors. They can't stand looking at themselves for long. Fourth, maintain emotional unpredictability. Toxic people depend on patterns. They study your rhythm. When you reply, when you smile, when you forgive, when you explode. Once they know your rhythm, they start conducting it. But Machiavelli believed that predictability is submission. So disrupt their expectations. Don't always be available. Don't always respond. Sometimes speak less, sometimes more. Leave them guessing about what version of you they'll face next time. Not because you want to play games, but because uncertainty is power. When they can't predict you, they can't prepare for you. And when they can't prepare, they retreat. Because control freaks hate variables they can't master. The fifth habit, detach from emotional validation. This is one of Machiavelli's hardest lessons to live by. Most people secretly want to be seen as good, kind, or fair. But toxic people weaponize that. They'll guilt-trip you with your own empathy. They'll make you feel cruel for having standards. Machiavelli would say, you are not obligated to be understood by the unreasonable. Detaching from validation doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means not needing their approval to know your worth. It's about understanding that toxic people will never validate your growth, because your growth threatens their control. When you stop chasing their understanding, they lose their favorite manipulation, your desire to please. And once that's gone, their influence collapses entirely. Sixth, learn to weaponize time. Toxic people are addicted to instant reaction. They bait you, waiting for you to respond impulsively. Every instant reply is a tiny confession of powerlessness. Machiavelli advised rulers to always delay when provoked, because time always reveals more than emotion ever will. So when someone sends a manipulative message, wait. When they demand attention, pause. Let silence and patience erode their urgency. Time exposes desperation, theirs, not yours. The more patient you become, the more their mask slips, and they'll eventually expose their real motives, just to break the tension you've created. Time is the most elegant weapon you can wield, because it doesn't require aggression, only composure. And finally, the seventh habit. Build an identity they can infiltrate. Toxic people thrive in environments where your identity depends on their approval. They attack your self-image, your self-worth, your choices, anything they can shape to make you feel small. But Machiavelli knew that true independence begins when your sense of self becomes self-governed. When you no longer need external permission to exist, manipulation fails by default. Every habit before this one leads to this point. Emotional neutrality makes you unreadable. Selective exposure limits their access. Silence, unpredictability, detachment, and patience, they all build the foundation for internal sovereignty. When you reach that state, toxic people stop even trying to control you, because they realize you're no longer participating. The same psychological game. Now here's the twist, Machiavelli would add. These 7 habits don't just make toxic people disappear. They expose everyone's true nature. Because once you develop emotional discipline, people reveal who they really are. The insecure will resent your peace. The power-hungry will test it. The self-aware will respect it. Your habits become filters. The weak will fade. The strong will stay. You don't chase them out. Your evolution makes them incompatible. This is how power works in silence. You don't win by confrontation. You win by becoming untouchable. Because Machiavelli understood something few people ever will. Control doesn't mean dominating others. It means mastering yourself so completely that no one else can. When you embody these habits long enough, the world adjusts around your presence. The toxic ones vanish not because you fought them, but because your calm made them irrelevant. They can exist where their chaos no longer matters. And that's the real disappearance. Not them leaving your life, but them losing their grip on your mind. Once you reach that, even their memory loses power. That's when you finally understand what Machiavelli meant when he said, "It is not necessary to destroy your enemies. It is enough to make them powerless." And when you begin living this way, when you carry yourself with this quiet power, something almost supernatural happens. People start treating you differently without you saying a single word. You become what Machiavelli called a force of quiet influence. Those who used to mock you will now measure every word before speaking to you. Those who once ignored you will start seeking your attention again, not because you changed them, but because your presence now reminds them of what they lack: control, restraint, and peace. But here's the truth, Machiavelli would whisper. Power like this doesn't come from pretending. It's not about rehearsed detachment or coldness for show. It's the byproduct of deep inner order. Every one of those 7 habits rewires how you value yourself. Emotional neutrality rewrites your instincts. You stop reacting to noise and start responding to purpose. Selective exposure reshapes your world. Suddenly, your environment reflects your priorities, not your distractions. Strategic silence trains your ego to rest, and unpredictability teaches you to move without being mapped. Each one builds you into someone who no longer depends on chaos to feel alive. And that's why toxic people fade. They can only survive in emotional climates where attention, validation, and reaction flow freely. You stop feeding the system, and the system collapses. Machiavelli understood that the ultimate victory isn't removing people from your life. It's making their tactics useless against you. Take emotional neutrality, for instance. When someone tries to provoke you, most people respond with equal force. But neutrality transforms the dynamic entirely. Imagine a manipulative coworker trying to humiliate you in front of others. You stay calm, maybe even smile faintly, and respond with precision rather than emotion. You don't mirror their energy. You control the temperature of the room. That single act disorients them. They expect chaos, but you deliver poise. You don't just look unbothered. You become the person who can be provoked. Eventually, even the boldest manipulators stop trying, because they realize there's no emotional currency to extract from you. And then comes selective exposure, one of the most practical yet underrated power moves. Machiavelli would say, "Power resides where attention flows." Every minute you give to the wrong person weakens your empire. Toxic people are like spies. They observe, collect, and use what they know against you. So you start treating your access like currency. You stop being constantly available. You make your time scarce, not out of arrogance, but strategy. Because when access becomes privilege, respect follows automatically. You don't have to demand it, they sense it. You'll notice it quickly. Texts get more polite, conversations get shorter, gossip disappears. They realize proximity to you now has conditions. Strategic silence, on the other hand, is where you start breaking their rhythm entirely. Silence feels unnatural at first. We're wired to explain, defend, and fill every pause. But once you master it, silence becomes the loudest statement you can make. When someone spreads rumors about you, say nothing. When someone tries to bait you into emotional war, say nothing. Because silence exposes motives faster than words ever can. It forces others to reveal whether they're genuinely concerned or simply seeking drama. It turns every manipulative conversation into an interrogation they're conducting on themselves. Toxic people, above all, hate silence. It leaves them alone with their reflection, and that's unbearable for them. Then there's unpredictability. This is psychological warfare disguised as composure. Machiavelli thrived on this principle. Predictable people are easy to control because their patterns can be mapped. If someone knows you'll always forgive them, they'll always test you. If they know you'll always explain, they'll always demand. But unpredictability breaks that loop. You stop broadcasting your moves. One day you respond, another you don't. One day you're available, another you vanish into stillness. This inconsistency isn't manipulation. It's boundary enforcement through mystery. You're teaching others that they can't rely on your reactions to validate their behavior. You're reminding them that you're not predictable enough to be exploited. And then comes detachment from validation, the one habit that separates those who merely look strong from those who actually are. Toxic people crave significance. They want to know they still have emotional access to you. Moment they see you unbothered by their approval or rejection, they panic because they realize your sense of worth now exists independently from their influence. You can disagree without guilt. You can say no without apology. You can walk away without explanation. That's terrifying to anyone who's built their power on emotional dependency. Machiavelli would tell you, "He who cannot be flattered cannot be controlled." Time, your invisible weapon, reinforces all of this. The more patient you become, the more desperate manipulators appear. They rush decisions, provoke urgency, fabricate crises, all to disrupt your calm. But your refusal to react fast turns every interaction into a psychological mirror. You watch, you wait, and you let people reveal themselves in the silence between your words. Patience turns you into an observer instead of a participant, and that's how you win. You let time filter truth without you lifting a finger. And finally, the identity no one can infiltrate. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes almost spiritual, because the ultimate form of power isn't domination, it's sovereignty over self. You stop performing. You stop chasing recognition. You stop explaining why you do what you do. Your habits start reflecting who you are, not who you're trying to prove yourself to be. And when you reach that point, the whole structure of toxicity collapses. You stop being a character in their story and become the author of your own. They might still exist around you, but their influence disintegrates, like shadows that can't survive the morning light. So understand this. You don't escape toxic people by fighting them, blocking them, or cursing their names. You outgrow them. You evolve past the level where their manipulation even works. And the 7 habits Machiavelli would teach are not defense mechanisms. They're evolution markers. Emotional neutrality is self-command. Selective exposure is strategic discipline. Silence is control of narrative. Unpredictability is mastery of power dynamics. Detachment is psychological freedom. Time is invisible dominance. And identity, that's your fortress. Build it tall, guard it well, and decorate it with nothing but your own peace. Once these habits become second nature, you'll notice the quiet shift. The same people who used to drain you will simply fade. Not dramatically, not explosively, just slowly, like a candle running out of wax. And when you look around, you'll see a life that feels lighter, clearer, freer. Not because they disappeared, but because you finally did the one thing they feared most. You became untouchable.